Hello, welcome to the How to Go Solar and Storage webinar. We're going to be getting started in just 1 minute. We're going to give it a moment for everyone to join us, but thank you for being here. All right, thank you so much for being here. My name's Abby. I'm a program manager with Solar Oregon, and this is our How to Go Solar and Storage webinar. In today's webinar, we're going to be going through how solar works, how you can know if your home is right for solar and batteries, how you can make solar batteries a little bit more affordable, and the information you need to know in order to get started. If throughout the presentation you have any questions, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. This is going to be the best way for me to see the questions you're asking, and there's no need to wait for the end of the presentation to put questions in there. Feel free to put them in at any time. Now, this presentation is possible and done through Solar Oregon, which is the organization I work for. Solar Oregon is a 501(c)(3) nonprofit that focuses on education, community, and advocacy for solar power and home energy storage throughout the state. We've been doing presentations like this one in and around Oregon since 1979. So we've been doing it for quite a long time. This presentation is also made possible by support from the Energy Trust of Oregon. Energy Trust of Oregon is serving 2.4 million people in the Pacific Northwest, helping them get clean, grown, renewable energy. Now, before I go through a few more housekeeping things, I'm going to launch some polls. If you wouldn't mind, please filling these out. It's just some demographic data about who's attending our webinars in order to help us continue to get funding. All your information will be kept confidential and will not be traced back to you. Thank you so much for filling that out. I'm going to launch the next poll. These are completely optional, but like I said, they do just help us get some demographic data about who's attending our webinars and help us secure more funding. Thank you so much. I'm going to launch the last poll now. Thank you so much for your participation. I really appreciate it. And now, without further ado, let's dive into the presentation, starting with how solar works. So here's a diagram of your basic solar system. In the top left over here, we have the photovoltaic or PV panel. This is what would be mounted on the ground or on the roof of your home. And when sunlight hits it, it generates a volt of electricity. This volt of electricity then flows into a new device that you would have installed with your PV panels, called an inverter or microinverter. I'll be talking about that more in depth on a later slide, but the purpose of the inverter or microinverter is to convert the electricity generated by the PV panel, which is DC or direct current electricity, to AC or alternating current electricity, which is usable by your home or business. From there, it then flows into your home electric panel to be utilized to help you turn on your lights, charge your electric vehicle, and do anything you need and that you need power for. If at any point in time your PV panels are generating more power than you are using, then it flows out through your new bidirectional utility meter that would get installed with your solar panels and to the utility grid to be used by your friends and neighbors. If at any point in time your solar panels are not generating as much power as your home needs, such as at night when there's no sun, then you will also still be able to pull power from the grid. This is called a grid-tied solar system. If you're in an off-grid cabin, that would be when you are not able to draw power back from the grid or send excess power out to the grid. So that's the basics of what's included in your solar system. I'll be diving into some of these components a little bit more in depth, but it's important to note just how simple it is. Solar is highly modular and can be very customizable to your specific home and needs. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit more about an inverter or microinverter. So the inverter pictured here on the left is a regular inverter, also sometimes called a string inverter, that is utilized to the direct current electricity generated by your solar panels to alternating or AC electricity used by your home. If you have a inverter or string, also known as a string inverter, like I said, you will have just one inverter. So for your 10 solar panels, you would have one inverter that takes all the power being generated by all of them at once and turns it into usable electricity all at once. The alternative to that is a microinverter, which is pictured on the right and is highlighted in the orange box. Now, microinverters could serve the same purpose. They convert the DC electricity generated by your panels to usable AC electricity. However, you could have they only take in the power from 1 to 2 panels at a time. So if you have a 10-panel system, you could have up to 10 microinverters in order to convert the electricity. Both are installed frequently throughout Oregon. It just really depends on the needs of your system, and your solar contractor will usually recommend one or the other, and you should definitely ask why they're recommending one of those. Now, another thing to consider when considering solar is whether or not you would need to upgrade your electric panel. In order to go solar, your electrical panel needs to have at least a 200 amperage rating. And if it is already full or does not have enough space on it, you may need to update it even if it does meet that requirement. Other reasons you may need to upgrade your electric panel include your home size and energy consumption habits. If you have a very small electric panel that has been upgraded in some time and yet you have a larger home, you may need to upgrade it. And the same holds true for older homes that may need general electrical upgrades. You also would want to consider future planning if you're intending to get an electric vehicle or switch to any other electric appliances that may require more amperage in the future. You definitely would want to consider that, and it might be beneficial to upgrade your electric panel when you are going solar as well. This does add added cost to a solar project, but it is something that usually your solar contractor can help you with. Now, here are two different mounting systems for your solar panels. On the left, we have a roof-mounted system, which is very common in high-density urban areas such as Portland, Salem, or Bend, where ground space is at a premium, and it's just solar that is mounted on your roof and allows us to benefit from the space that is already being utilized without taking up more of a ground footprint. The alternative option is a ground-mounted solar system, which is pictured on the right. This is what you'll see when you drive out to the gorge and you see those solar farms out on your way. Ground-mounted solar systems are really great options. However, they can be a little bit more expensive, as you will need to still run conduit from the ground-mounted system back to your home in order to get the power to where it needs to be. However, if you have the space, they can be a really great option for your home. Now that we've talked a little bit about the basics of a solar system, how does solar actually help save you money? So in order to explain that, I'm going to walk through two examples. The first is how you gain net metering credits throughout the summer, and then how you use them up during the winter. Net metering credits is the system that we have here in Oregon that allows you to save money by exporting some amount of the power you are generating to your grid. So it's a pretty sunny day here. I feel like if I had solar on my home, we'd be getting lots of good solar power. It's a long day. It was sunny for most of the day, or at least this afternoon. So my solar production would be up here. It's high. I've produced so much solar energy, and my consumption of what I've needed to use today is only about half of that. So all that excess power that my solar panels would be generating is going to get exported to the grid to be utilized by my friends and neighbors, and I would earn net metering credits for that difference. Now, if we think about 6 months from now when it's going to be rainy and cold and gray, and it's not going to be that nice to be outside and go for a walk again, my solar panels would still be producing some amount of power. There's still some amount of sun even on a cloudy day, and your solar panels would still produce some amount of electricity. However, the amount it's producing is not quite enough to meet that amount of consumption I have, has not changed between the summer and winter months. And so I will then need to draw more power from the grid in order to offset that difference. However, I earn net metering credits all summer long, which will then offset the electricity I'm needing to draw from the grid in the winter. Net metering credits roll over from month to month, so you're able to build up credits all summer long and then use them all winter. The one thing that's important to note here is that net metering credits do not roll over from year to year. The net metering year begins and ends around March 31st. So at that point, any excess net metering credits you have get donated to low-income subscribers and some nonprofits through your utility company. The net PG or Pack Power, unfortunately, will not cut you a check for those excess credits. And this is why sizing your system to be the correct size for the amount of power your home needs is really important. So what does this actually look like on your bill? So here's an example of your energy bill. So we can see that this consumer had a net meter reading at the beginning of the month of 237 and at the end of the month of 564. And their net period usage was negative 327 kilowatt hours. So that means they got 327 kilowatt hours of net metering credits added to their year-to-date banked excess generation. So for this customer, that is 3,072 kilowatt hours. And so they are building up their credits. And as I said, they'll be able to use those credits all winter long. Now, one thing that's important to note is that while they have a billable kilowatt hours of 0, they exported more to the grid than they needed this month. They didn't have any billable kilowatt hours. Their monthly bill, unfortunately, will not be $0.00. Just to be connected to the grid, we pay some base taxes and fees that average out to be between $12 and $18 per month, depending on where you are in the state. So unfortunately, you will not have a bill of $0.00. You still have to pay that about $15 per month. However, that is much less than the average utility bill here in Oregon, which is between $70 and $100 and is going up consistently. So that's just something to keep in mind. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in that Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. I know net metering can be a little bit difficult to understand at first, and I want to make sure you get your questions answered. So now, how can you know if your home is right for solar? So no matter where you are in the state, in general, Oregon has enough solar access. Here's a simple diagram of the arcs the sun travels in throughout the sky. So we can see when it's at its highest point in the sky at the summer solstice and at its lowest point in the sky at the winter solstice. And you can see from this diagram that it is always in the southern hemisphere of the sky. This means that as long as ideally, you can install your solar panels on a south-facing roof plane. However, you can get enough solar access installing solar on east, west, and southeast and southwest roof-facing planes. The only roof-facing plane that you usually cannot get enough solar access on is north-facing planes, as the sun is not in that part of the sky. With that being said, depending on the specifics of your home, you might still not have enough solar access in order to justify going solar. One of the common things I hear about that prevents people from having enough solar access, even if they have gorgeous south-facing roof planes, is shade. But shade is really good. We love our big trees. They help keep our city cool. They help keep your house cool and help put really great nutrients and oxygen into the air. But if your home is very heavily shaded, like these homes pictured here, it can prevent you from being able to go solar. With that being said, if you are so interested in supporting the solar economy or going solar in some way, I highly recommend you check out Community Solar, and I will actually put a link to that in the chat right now, as well as some other links that may be useful from this presentation. Now, as I said, net metering credits roll over from month to month, but not year to year. That means it's very important that you size your system correctly to meet but not exceed the amount of electricity you are expected to consume. Your solar contractor will meet with you to ask how much to see some previous energy bills and talk through any life changes you might be having, such as anyone moving in and out of your home or upgrading appliances to be electrical that may adjust your energy consumption. So their goal is to size your system to be as correct to what you need as possible. And as I said, So some questions you want to ask are how much energy do you use and how much space do you have? Because that can also be a limiting factor to the amount of solar you can get. Here in Oregon, the average size for a system is about 8 kilowatts. Now, another thing that can impact your ability to go solar is the shape of your roof. If you have a very complex roof, like pictured on the left, even if you have lots of south-facing roof planes, they can be smaller and more broken up, and that can make it very difficult to put solar on your roof, as you will have to have multiple smaller arrays, which just adds to workman costs and makes it a more complicated project overall, which increases costs. On the flip side, if you have a very simple roof plane, like pictured on the right, you can have one continuous array, and that can make things a little bit easier, make it not necessarily cheaper. I don't want to imply you'll get a large discount for having a simple roof, but definitely will allow you to have a larger continuous array, which can only benefit you. Now, in addition to the shape of your roof condition can also make a difference. We recommend that you have at least 10 years of roof life left, as solar must be taken off when you are re-roofing your home, and panels can be very easily damaged beyond repaired within that process. It can also add extra cost, as you have to pay solar contractors or a contractor to come out, take the solar panels off your roof, and then reinstall them on your roof after you have re-roofed. That is why we recommend, if you have an old roof, wait to go solar until after you re-roof your home. Now I'm going to dive into the exciting topic of battery storage. So a common misconception about solar is that solar alone will allow you to use power when the grid is down. However, due to safety concerns of not wanting to electrocute anyone working on the power grid when it is down, in order to retain power when the grid is out, you need an added storage system. The ability to use power when the grid is down is called energy resilience. Now, there can be many reasons that the power grid might be going down. Short, frequent outages can be caused by storms or squirrels. These can typically only last a few hours to a few days and are usually rectified pretty quickly. Here in Oregon, we also have the risk of fires, and at times the power grid is shut down in order to lower the wildfire risk. The first of these safety power shutoffs occurred in 2020, and they have continued throughout the state since that time. And we also have the unique risk of the Cascadia earthquake. The Cascadia earthquake has been predicted to be hitting Oregon for the last number of years at any point in time. And when it does hit, it is thought that we could lose power in the Willamette Valley and Portland Metro for up to 3 weeks and even longer out on the coast. So when it comes to picking a battery, it's important to know that many installers may specialize in one specific battery. So if there's one you know you want, make sure you get make sure you're working with an installer who is comfortable installing that battery and has done it before. If you're powering a motor, it's also important to check your surge capacity, and battery systems cannot be mixed and matched. If you already have a Tesla Powerwall, you'll be unable to get an Enphase battery without taking your Tesla Powerwall out of your system completely. So be aware of that when picking what battery you want. Your solar panels and your battery can be different brands though. And lastly, batteries require space. Batteries cannot be placed inside a crawl space or covered according to the National Electric Code, and they can take up a significant amount of space inside a garage. Ideally, they're mounted near a breaker panel or something like that, but they can be placed outside as well. Now, when it comes to using your battery, the two options are really a partial backup and a whole home backup. A whole home backup can be prohibitively expensive to do for any significant amount of time. And this is really just because your solar panels if it's a storm outage, there might not be enough sun for your solar panels to recharge your battery. We certainly hope there would be, but that's not a guarantee. And your solar panels could get damaged in the process. So having enough batteries to back up your entire home for a significant amount of time can be cost prohibitive. So what many people like to do instead is a partial home backup. This is when you select certain circuits to be placed on a power backup system and to retain power in the event of an outage rather than the entire system. There are 3 different options on how you can have a partial home backup. The first is the creation of an essential loads panel. This is when a secondary smaller electric panel is added to your home, usually right next to your original electric panel, and specific circuits are moved to that new electric panel. This allows you those new circuits will be the only ones that retain power when the grid is down, while the other circuits will be automatically shut off. Another option are smart breakers, which can allow you to allow some circuits to retain power in the event of an outage, while others do not, and they can all be within one breaker panel. And lastly, there is a smart electric panel, which is a newer technology and allows you to further customize and change what circuits retain power via an app on your phone. I know some people who have smart electric panels and they use it to turn off the TV and make it so that their TV and video game systems no longer receive power after a certain time in order to monitor their kids' screen time usage. So it can also be used in that way as well. The way a smart panel works is it allows you to create 3 different sections of must-have, nice-to-have, and non-essential. Anything in the non-essential category will be shut off immediately when the power goes out. Things in the nice-to-have will retain power until your battery reaches 50% capacity. You can also adjust that number, but generally we see it at 50%, at which point those circuits will also be shut off, and then those must-have ones will retain power for as long as your battery has charge available. Now, when thinking about creating a partial loads panel and what you are wanting to back up, it's a question of what needs power and for how long. The more things you have drawing power from your battery, the shorter amount of time your battery will last. However, you also want to make sure you are putting the things that are important to you onto your battery to retain power. Some things that are commonly selected are a fridge, an outlet or two, and some lights in common areas. So now that I've gone through all of that, I'm going to talk through the available incentives that can help you save money when going solar. So the largest incentive available for going solar is the Solar Investment Tax Credit, or ITC. The ITC is a 30% of your solar system cost as a dollar for dollar tax credit. And now I'm going to talk about this in more detail, but really quick, I am not a tax professional. This is not official tax advice. If I was a tax professional, I probably would have gotten a better tax return this year. So if you have any specific tax questions, please consult a tax professional, as this is not any official tax advice. With that being said, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the ITC solar tax credit. The ITC can be applied to both solar and storage system, and as I said, it's a 30% dollar for dollar credit. So if your system is $100, let's say, you would get a $30 credit on your taxes the next year. And if you do not have enough tax liability to claim the entire credit in 1 year, it can also be claimed over several years. There are many common misconceptions with the federal tax credit. One of the most common myths I hear about is that re-roofing costs can be claimed under it, and unfortunately this is false. The IRS has actually come out and said this is false. So be aware of any scams like that, and as I said previously, only trust tax professionals. Now, here in Oregon, we also have the Energy Trust of Oregon incentives. Energy Trust of Oregon offers some basic incentives for anyone who is within the PGE or Pack Power service area. If you're a PGE customer, you can get $900 off for a solar system and $400 per kilowatt hour up to $4,800 for storage. If you are a Pack Power customer, you can get $1,050 off for solar and $450 per kilowatt hour up to $5,400 for storage. In order to claim this credit, it's very easy for you as the consumer. The only thing you have to do is work with an Energy Trust of Oregon Trade Ally contract. Hello, I'm so sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened to my Wi-Fi, but it seemed to go away for a moment. Thank you for sticking with me there. I'm going to reshare my screen and dive back into talking about incentives. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, or not in the chat, in the Q&A, and I'll be going through those at the end of the presentation. So in order to claim the Energy Trust of Oregon incentives, you do need to work with an Energy Trust of Oregon Trade Ally contractor. This is a contractor that has already been vetted and by Energy Trust of Oregon and is familiar with all Energy Trust of Oregon design and installation requirements. They will then apply for the Energy Trust of Oregon incentives on your behalf and receive them on your behalf, and you will just see the discount on your final bill. This is a really great, easy program for you because the only thing you have to do is work with an already vetted contractor, which is something I would recommend doing anyway. In addition to the Energy Trust of Oregon standard incentives, there's also Energy Trust offers an income qualified incentive for both solar and storage. This is the similar system of a certain amount off for solar and a certain amount off for storage, just at slightly higher levels for people who are within a certain income threshold. The income cutoff is very generous at about $120,000 for a family of 4. So definitely check it out and see if you might qualify for any additional incentives. Now, I'm going to go through a budget for a sample solar system in just a moment, but I want to be very clear that this is a sample budget. And as I said at the beginning, solar is a highly modular system. So while this is one example of what it might look like for you to go solar, your costs might look very different. It could be a lot more, it could be a lot less even. So there's lots of reasons costs can vary, including your system size and design. If you are needing to do any roofing or electrical upgrades, if you're installing storage later at the same time as your solar panels, what incentives you can access and how your interconnection is handled. So here's an example of a solar plus storage system of an 8 kilowatts solar system and a 13.5 kilowatt storage system. So for just the solar system, before any incentives, it's about $32,000. And for solar plus storage, it is $52,000. From there, you can then get the Energy Trust incentive of $900 or $5,700 if you are getting solar plus storage. And that makes your total out of pocket about $31,100 or $46,300 for solar and storage. From there, you then get to claim that 30% investment tax credit and making your actual total for a 8 kilowatt solar system $21,770 and for a storage system $32,410 for a solar plus storage system, not just storage. And as I said, income qualifying incentives can help you save additional money. And costs can typically increase if you're adding storage later and not at the same time as your solar system. That just comes from having to have contractors and electricians come out a second time and they need to pull permits twice rather than getting everything done at once. So when it comes to financing your system, financing is very common, and there are some loan products tailored directly to solar. Your installer may have a financing partner they work with, but I highly recommend, here at Solar Oregon highly recommend you consider all your options and do whatever is best for your financial situation. Some credit unions offer loans tailored to solar that will allow you to refinance after getting that 30% federal tax credit. And so definitely check with your solar installer, your bank, and also local credit unions to see what options may be available and what is the best fit for you. So now with all this information, how do you get started? As I said, I would highly recommend working with the best, and that is the Trade Allies of Energy Trust of Oregon. These are solar contractors who have been rigorously qualified and approved to offer Energy Trust incentives. So working with them actually helps save you money, as I've already explained, and they're familiar with all Energy Trust design and installation requirements. You can request a custom analysis and bid for free. So if you scan the QR code that is currently on the screen, you can get a analysis and bid of your solar project from up to 3 contractors that work in your area that are Energy Trust of Oregon Trade Ally. So this is a completely free program and does not commit you to going solar in any way. It's just a great way to get information and get some different bids to compare. We always recommend you get at least a few bids to compare anyway, so this is a great and easy way to do that. When it comes to installation, your contractor will complete all paperwork for you and pull all the permits except for the federal tax credit. Permitting typically takes between 2 and 12 months. However, once the permits are completed and approved, installation is very quick, usually taking only 1 to 4 days, and your contractor will manage all inspections and interconnections. If you enjoyed this presentation, please consider becoming a member or donating to Solar Oregon today. You can also follow us on social media and Eventbrite at Solar Oregon. And now I'm going to go through the Q&A. If you have any questions, please put them into the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. I'm also going to go ahead and launch one final poll, so you can tell me how I did about explaining all the different things, but please put your questions into the Q&A function. I'm here to answer them, and I want to make sure you come away with all the questions you have about solar answered. Thank you for everyone for filling out that poll. As I said, I'm here to get your questions answered and want to make sure I do that. So if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A. And thank you so much for coming today. If you are interested in getting that custom analysis and bid from the Solar Energy Trust Oregon Solar Bid Tool, you can scan the QR code that's on the screen as well. But thank you so much for being here. We got one question in, we got some questions in the chat, so I'll go through and answer those. One person asked, says they've seen solar in parking lots as a kind of car shade. Is that something you've seen solar installers do? Yes, I have seen solar installed on a carport type of structure in order to act as car shade. The permitting for this can be a little bit funky just based on where you are, but definitely it is an option you can talk to an installer about. Depending on the installer, you might need to build the structure first and they will add solar on it after, or they might be able to do the entire thing. It really just depends. Another attendee asked if they can access the slides after this presentation ends. And yes, I will be sending out an email with the recording of this presentation, and that will include the slides as well in the recording. And then we also got a question of, is there a list of Solar Oregon authorized vendors? So we are actually a contractor neutral organization. We do not work with contractors. That way you can know any education we are providing is impartial. We're not trying to steer you or give you a sales pitch to work with contractor A because they are also paying us money to do that. We partner with local small businesses, and that includes contractors, but we are contractor neutral and instead just point you to the Energy Trust of Oregon Trade Allied list. That would be my recommendation of where to look if you are looking for vendors that have already been vetted by an outside org. We got a question of, are there any incentives for rental properties? So you would be able to claim both all the incentives I previously mentioned for a rental property. As far as I'm aware, there is no you having to be owner occupied requirement for those programs. You might want to double check that for the investment tax credit, but I know at least for the Energy Trust of Oregon one, you would be able to claim those credits. However, depending on how your utility system works with any tenants, or if you are a renter, that can get a little bit complicated, and there are not any incentives available specifically for that. If you currently live in a rental, I would highly recommend checking out the community solar program. There's a link to that in the chat, and I will also resend it quickly just so that we can be sure everyone got it, as that is a really great program for renters. And if you are a landlord, the benefit to you, it's a split cost benefit, as you, the landlord, would have to pay for the solar panels, while if your tenants are paying for their own electricity, they would get the benefit of lower electricity costs. There are ways to offset this, and there are some buildings out in Tigard. I know there is a building out in Tigard that was built recently that has solar and is passing the benefit of that onto the customer without costing the building money itself. We've done a showcase event there, and I would keep an eye out on Solar Oregon's other events to look for future events where we might be talking more about the rental market with solar. There are any other questions, please put them in the Q&A box. I'm more than happy to stay on. I'll give it another minute. If there's no other questions, I'll end the webinar then. But thank you so much for coming today, and I hope you learned something and got excited about solar power.